Right, so Dublin beat Carlow by 20 points to 9. As soon as half time went, or sorry, early in the second half, it was pretty obvious that Dublin were going to cruise home, having been 6 points to 4 ahead at half time. It was pretty much plain sailing from then on, especially with at the start of the second half, Davy Keogh, who came on and made a good impact at corner forward, and Roman a bit further out. I think people might remember him playing for St. Tom or Thomas Davis's, I should say, in the Dublin Football Championship last year, and they got to the county final. He's been in and around the panel for a little bit, and probably hadn't found a position for him. Probably doesn't have the silkiest skills going, but really effective, really direct runner. There's a big worry for Carlow here because they've played 3 games in Division 1, which is obviously split into 2 separate groups, and in 3 games, and there's definitely injuries involved, so you'd have to certainly feel sorry for Colin Bonner on that front, that they've definitely been down lads in those opening 3 games. But over the course of the 3 games, they've scored 32 points, which is less than 11 points per game. You talk about 14 points against Clare in the first game, then 9 points against Kilkenny, 9 points again the last day. And after doing so well in the Leinster Championship last year, it's kind of disappointing. But as I said, you do have to feel sorry a little bit for them. A couple of the things that stood out from the game. Rian McBride, really, really good. Got man of the match on Air Sport and just on the ball just throughout the game. And he's definitely someone that I would have always seen as a likely guy to come through for Dublin. I remember even the under-21s a couple of years ago, he was used at full forward at times and looked really good. Definitely plays further out the field for St. Vincent's an awful lot. Scored 4 or 5 points here, wing forward. And Chris Crummy, this is one that's been kind of wondering about for a while. Would they ever consider moving him upfield? Because he's played in the half back line, and I know in the league last year he scored 10 points from play, and it's like he's very comfortable going further up the field. And I remember in a league game for Lucan once we played against him, and he must have soloed something like 60 yards with the ball, flicked it over 2 lads' heads running up the sideline, and threw it over the bar. So he's very talented. He played further up the field, looked to be in midfield, maybe kind of in and out towards the half forward line, centre forward at times. But maybe people who were there can sort of give their feedback on where they thought he was playing most of the time. But seemed to be at midfield, and I think with Dublin being down a certain amount of guys over the last few years, even Darragh O'Connell isn't there now, Sean Tracy isn't there anymore. They probably Ben Quinn was there a couple of years ago, and he looked like a good option. None of them are particularly big physical players, but if you can afford to take Chris Crummy out of the half back line and put him upfield, he's probably one of the more natural players who could do it. Sean Moran is someone else who spent his underage career playing in the forward line, or certainly a nice bit of it, and we often joke at him about going back into the forward line, but he's probably the best guy in terms of if you're going to have an extra guy at the back, or a spare man, or a sweeper, or whatever you want to call it. He's probably the most comfortable of all the Dublin players to do that. So releasing Crummy up the field seems like the most obvious sort of one. I'd say Dublin would probably be looking for a little bit more out of Oisin O'Rourke and Mark Shuday. Probably not great days for them. They were kind of taken off early enough. Shane Barrett was back into the team, taken off at half time. Not sure if there was an injury involved there, but certainly a crazy off the ball free towards the end of the first half might have played a part in that. Jack Kavanagh was after knocking a ball up the line 30 yards ahead, which he had to run onto himself, and Sean Moran was intercepting the ball, and Shane Barrett did a off the ball free, but our third man tackle. But he's a very good player, and one of those guys that'll have to do well in the half back line, as he has done previously, for Chris Crummy to play further up the field. So it's just interesting to see if he is going to continue there. One of the things that I kind of thought turned the game, like it was 4 points to 6 at half time, and to me it seemed as if Dublin were playing with the wind in the first half and against it in the second half. And sometimes when you're playing with the wind, as Carlow were after the break, you tend to get dragged out the field a little bit. Your puck outs even carry a little bit further, so you end up pushing further out the field, which meant that unlike the first half, there's probably a bit more space in that Dublin forward line. So the likes of Davy Keogh had a bit more space to work into. Was it any surprise that John Heatherton got into the game a little bit more? And you could probably say the same for Donald Burke too, who didn't have a great first half. I mentioned Crummy midfield. Jake Malone did pretty well midfield also. Dara Gray grew into the game, and not only did he score a couple of points from the half-back line, he also hit a couple of nice kind of diagonal balls across into the forward line. Ronan Hayes is a player that obviously has a bit of talent playing in full forward for Dublin, and I've seen him for the last couple of years with Kilmacud Crokes. Pretty obvious he's a very good player, and even though like it's not like he went to town with scores tonight, you can kind of just see flashes that he's going to be a threat. Dublin definitely won't be happy with their conversions in front of the post in terms of goals. In the first half, Chris Crummy pulled on a ball, pulled it wide. Probably a tough one in the conditions, and I suppose everything about tonight has to be framed in the context of the conditions. Donald Burke probably took on a goal chance right after Crummy had his effort a couple of minutes later. Probably too narrow an angle and straight at the keeper, so that was just after the half-hour mark for both of those. Davy Keogh turned his man brilliantly, knocked the ball over the bar when a goal was on, and then also there was a couple more chances. I think John Heatherton hit one at the keeper. Again, a lot of this hitting it straight at the keeper, and Oisin O'Rourke whipped it wide then, and then also Ronan Hayes had another chance. So it finished 20 points to 9, and it could have been far more. And just to sum up the worries for Carlow, in the first half, a grand total of 2 shots from play, overall 7 shots from play, and a few of those kind of late on in the game when kind of the horse had long bolted. 4 points from play overall, really not a great return at all. Mouse Kavanagh definitely looks like a danger if you can get him on the ball at all, but just to even finish off the kind of stats, over the course of the game, Carlow had 17 attempts and Dublin had 39, which is nearly twice as many. And for Dublin, it's important to win a game like this and to be convincing too, because the manner of the loss against Kilkenny in the first round, Kilkenny went down to 14 men and still hockeyed Dublin, and Dublin wouldn't have been missing too many players. Like, there's a few players that aren't back in the panel, and Conal Keeney isn't back yet, and I believe he played a challenge match against Lavey of Derry there last week for Ballyboden, so I'm not sure, does that mean he's going to be back in or not? Maybe he will, maybe he won't. For example, David Tracy played a challenge match for Coola today, and he, as far as I know, is still back on the panel. So there are some players just getting game time with their clubs, while the lads who've been there all along continue to play these league games. But Dublin can't be going into the Leinster Championship on the back of disappointing losses, and I keep mentioning the fact that losing to Laois last year kind of stained what was otherwise a very good year. So if Dublin get a few wins on the board, get the confidence up, get a win that people, there's definitely a couple of more winnable games in here. They can fancy themselves to beat Clare, who are going fairly well. They can push Wexford next week at Croke Park. Actually, that is a perfect opportunity to see where this Dublin team is at, because the last time they played Wexford at Croke Park, I think it was 4 years ago, and they beat Wexford by 12 points. Now, both teams have gone maybe slightly different directions since, but they should be buzzing forward, because Dublin haven't played in Croke Park even for a couple of years, which is kind of mad when you think about it, when the footballers seem to be a permanent fixture there. But from Dublin's point of view, great win by 11 points. Carlow, very, very worrying. Maybe a small panel, couple of injuries, and just tough for Colin Bonner to pick them up from there. Thanks for watching Our Game. Don't forget to like and share the videos, and if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe.